You've Got Mail, a movie Megan loves.
I've never seen it.
I saw it when it came out. I was in high school when it came out, and I was dating a girl who I made her see The Thin Red Line with me. So she's like, okay, well, since that was like 9 hours long, you're going to have to see like 3 romantic comedies with me. I'm like, that's fair.
A lot of those movies hold up, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I remember liking You Got Mail. I haven't seen it in a long time, but yeah, I remember thinking it was a good movie.
Okay, 80s?
Oh my God, that Bond movie's so fucking bad.
Yeah, I have a surprise for you because I was mad at you for this James Bond.
Ah.
All right, and we're back. And it's 1983, and Jake gave me a real crappy movie to watch this time, and I'm mad at him. But we're going to talk about it anyway, and we're also going to talk about a really good movie that I gave him. I'm Brad Garoon. I'm here with Jake Ziegler. The movies are Trading Places and Never Say Never Again for some reason. Let's do the good one first, because let's put off Never Say Never Again for as long as we can. Jake, I gave you Trading Places. This is one of my favorite comedies of all time. I've watched this since I was way too young. It was just one of those movies that was on HBO all the time. It's terrific. It stars Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy as people from opposite sides of the track who trade places. It also stars Jamie Lee Curtis in a movie that I think made most people go through puberty who saw it at the time. She really did a thing in this movie. It's directed by John Landis, one of his many terrific comedies, and we don't talk about the bad stuff he did.
Yeah.
And it also stars Ralph Bellamy and Don Amici as amazing villains. Denholm Elliott in one of his great roles. You love him from Indiana Jones. You like him from Trading Places. First off, I made you watch this. Why don't you tell us the premise of the movie?
Well, the premise of the movie is that there's a rich white man who works for a brokerage firm played by Dan Aykroyd, who is just wonderful. Again, and you don't see him in movies much anymore. So any chance I can go back to see a Dan Aykroyd, something I haven't seen by him before, great opportunity. Thank you very much for suggesting it.
You're welcome.
And he plays a rich white guy. He comes across down on his luck, not wealthy black man played by Eddie Murphy, who
homeless guy.
Homeless, who was kind of just coming into his own as a comedian, had just come off, I believe, 48 Hours. Comedy specials had been seen, so he was really shooting up the ranks of Hollywood, leading men, especially the action comedy genre that was all the rage in the 80s. But this is just more of a straight comedy between them anyway. But they decide, this is a couple months ago that I watched it, the bad guys decide,
who are Dan Aykroyd's bosses. I'll never forget this. They're just monsters. His bosses. There's these two old men who own the broker, and they like Dan Aykroyd, but one of them likes him more than the other, and they have a philosophical disagreement about what it takes to be successful in America. One of them is sitting on the toilet and he's reading an article about Darwin, and they get into nature versus nurture. So one wants to prove that it's your upbringing that makes you successful, and the other wants to prove that if you are inherently smart, you can succeed anyway, even if you don't have all the bells and whistles. So they ruin Dan Aykroyd's life and give it to Eddie Murphy by planting drugs on him, they hire this stoogey guy to convince Jamie Lee Curtis, who's a prostitute, to make out with Dan Aykroyd in front of his wife. You have to suspend a lot of disbelief, because the amount of people who just don't believe anything Dan Aykroyd is saying is just unfathomable, but it's so funny. And eventually Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy get wind of what's going on and decide to team up. Even though they did not get along in the beginning of the movie, they decide to team up because they can, one, make more money by ruining their bosses, and two, neither of them likes being manipulated.
Right. Well, I loved it, and it is funny. It's funny almost all the way through, and it's just because they don't get along at first. What is it, Dan Aykroyd, that he thinks that Eddie Murphy stole something from him, like thinks that he pickpocketed him or something like really benign like that, so that it's even this much bigger deal when it comes back on Dan Aykroyd, where he then has to live the life of a homeless man and kind of see what that's like. And Dan Aykroyd is not, I like this character because it's not like he's not totally a bad guy. He's not the greatest guy either.
He's a pretty bad guy.
Yeah,
he's a jerk.
I guess comparing him to the older guys, though, yeah.
If it wasn't for his life completely falling apart, he never would have been nice to anyone like Jamie Lee Curtis or Eddie Murphy. He's very reliant on his butler, played by Denholm Elliott. Terrific performance by Denholm Elliott, playing it very straight. He's pretty much the only person in this movie playing it straight. I guess Jamie Lee Curtis as well. But it's also Dan Aykroyd not playing his usual type. He's playing a really affected Northeastern guy. Mm-hmm. Also, it's so funny to watch this now because this came out not long before Wall Street, when you got a sense of what people... Yeah. And that's, as someone who lives in and now near New York, Wall Street is much more what finance people are like. And whatever it is Dan Aykroyd was doing is something else. That's like trust fund baby, weird affected thing. It's not brokerage people, but it's very funny. Yeah. Murphy actually gets to do a lot. He's playing it pretty broad in the beginning, and then he narrows it quite a bit as the movie goes on. He takes to the life of a rich person very quickly and gets very annoyed when his old friends treat his new apartment very poorly, which I thought was just so funny. And then Jamie Lee Curtis comes in and gets topless and changes everyone's life.
What a time to be alive that must have been.
It was really crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she's very good in it. And then the heist scheme, it's essentially a heist scheme that they put together to ruin fortunes of these two old men is great. And I wouldn't call it a heist film, but you get the same juice out of it that you get from
heist. I mean, there's a heist. It's a film with a heist in it.
And there's also a man in a gorilla suit in it played by Jim Belushi, which is also pretty funny. Maybe Jim Belushi's best performance.
Any Jim Belushi performance where we don't really have to hear him talk so much, that's probably right.
Yeah, although I will say, and I may have talked about this on the podcast before, maybe on the David Lynch episode, that his performance in Twin Peaks: The Return is very good.
Oh, really?
It's a comic role, but it's very heartfelt, and he's really endearing in it.
Oh, that's good. Good for him.
Yeah, it's him, and I forget the actor's name. Do you remember the movie A History of Violence?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know the guy who robs the diner at the beginning of the movie and gets his face smashed in by a coffee pot?
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's those two. It's Jim Belushi and that guy. They're brothers.
Okay, yeah. I can't place that name either, but I know the face. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, he's creepy.
Well, what's interesting about this too is how little of this would work today, and none of it. Like, I don't know, maybe if they did it in reverse, would that be?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, it could, although I could see people being very upset by that.
Yeah, I just don't think that would work either. Yeah, I think it's just a concept that people say, oh, nothing's safe from a remake. Like, I think some things might be safe from a remake, and this might be it.
I'll tell you what, the amount of times they use the F slur in this movie, that's safe from a remake.
Yeah, there's a lot of that in there. And, again, I'm not going to try to retroactively cancel it because that was...
No, it's a great movie.
It's still hilarious. And that's, what it was at the time. And it's just jarring to hear.
There's a lot of ends in this movie too.
Yep. It's still a little surprising when you hear it. But yeah, it's just one of those little movies where almost everything is funny. But even though there's, like you said, there's a lot of suspension of disbelief for a lot of what the people believe or don't believe about the Dan Aykroyd character, but the people feel at least pretty genuine. Jamie Lee Curtis especially, I think really brings a lot to that stereotypical hooker with a heart of gold, but I think she brings a lot to it because she's awesome, and she's always been awesome, and it took the industry too long to give her some recognition that they finally gave her this year.
Oh my God, you're watching The Bear now, right?
I am watching The Bear now.
So she's in it, season 2, and I would say not a ton. She's only 2 episodes, but so far. But I would say that I've heard some backlash to her performance, and I can see why. She goes big, but she goes hard in The Bear.
Yeah.
It's also another thing that's kind of wild about this movie is just seeing Don Amici, who, aside from Trading Places, I knew as like the good-hearted old man in Cocoon or the voice of a dog in Homeward Bound. And here he's dropping N-bombs, and it's pretty wild.
Mm-hmm. And it's just malicious, and nothing good about him at all.
He's the more evil of the two brothers, too, or sort of. It depends on your point of view. Ralph Bellamy I don't have much exposure to Ralph Bellamy outside of this movie, but he's so sweet. He's in Pretty Woman, but I don't know.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And he's in Rosemary's Baby, but I haven't seen that in like 15 years.
You know what? That's another one that would be high on my list of never did it's.
You've never seen Rosemary's Baby? The prequel or whatever is coming out now. That's crazy.
Never did it.
Wow. Okay. Did I put that on the list?
Oh, the original Planet of the Apes.
So I think that's better, actually.
Yeah. Oh, I've never seen Planet of the Apes. Wow. There was an Oscar nomination for Trading Places. Did you know that?
Oh, yeah. I didn't know that. No.
There was one Oscar nomination for Trading Places, and it was nominated for Best Original Score, and it lost to Yentl.
I mean, Yentl is a music movie, so that makes sense.
Right. And Trading Places is
it's like
not generally kind of movie that wins Oscar.
It's a generic comedy score. Why did that? That's weird. Whatever. All right. So Never Say Never Again.
Yeah.
What the heck, man?
Well, again, I think I was pretty limited with choices here. We'd seen a lot of the same movies from 83, and it's kind of a weird dead zone because there was no Indiana Jones movie that year. There's no Ghostbusters movie that year.
Well, I've seen those, so
there's no back. Yeah, there wasn't I just feel like I had a pretty limited set of choices.
So I made a list of movies you could have given me instead. You could have given me Octopussy, which I doubt is better. But
Octopussy is really, really terrible.
But maybe it would have been terrible. And so Never Say Never Again is a remake of Thunderball, starring the same star as Thunderball, just
older.
And also there's no style to this movie. There's no panache. Bond is lame. The song Never Say Never Again is, I think, the worst Bond song. I'm pretty confident in saying it's one of the worst songs. Yeah. So it's probably the worst Bond song. There are costumes in this movie that they're not so bad it's good, they're just bad. In fact, this whole movie it's not so bad it's good, it's just bad, except Kim Basinger is so hot, and Rowan Atkinson's in it for 2 minutes.
That's right.
I got nothing else out of this. There's a scene he's playing against the bad guy in a video game, and I was like, I bet they were so stoked about putting this fake VR in this movie, and it looks like crap, and I bet it looks like crap at the time. Like, 83? What year did Tron come out?
Tron was, I think, 82.
So already shown up by Tron.
Right.
It's like Wakanda Forever coming out after Avatar Way of Water. It just looked bad.
Right. Whoops.
Whoops. Okay, so you could have given me Octopussy. You could have given me Mickey's Christmas Carol. I would have been happy to watch.
Oh man, is that a feature length?
I don't know. You could have given me Neil Young in Berlin, a concert film that you've seen.
I do love Neil Young, and I love that Berlin concert. There's a song on that DVD that he's never put out on CD or digital anywhere. That's the only place it exists, is on that DVD.
So we could have done that. That could have been, I don't know if it would have made for a good conversation, but it would have been better.
We can talk about Neil Young anytime.
So I'm going to take a quick diversion. You could have also given me, and this is the big one, Risky Business. Why didn't you give me Risky Business? Today, I watched Risky Business.
Why did I not give you Risky Business? I love Risky Business.
I don't know. I watched it today and it's freaking great. So
it's an incredible movie. It holds up really well.
Really well. I'm just going to give you my thoughts on Risky Business real quick, because when I woke up this morning, I was like, I know we're doing this episode today. I'm watching Risky Business anyway. Risky Business has, and James Bond, Never Say Never Again, has none of this. Risky Business has Bronson Pinchot. Risky Business has Curtis Armstrong in like probably his first big movie. This is pre-Booger, Curtis Armstrong. It has Joey Pants looking very weird and skinny. It has Richard Mazer being a perv. It has Rebecca De Mornay, need I say more? Like very much in competition with Kim Basinger. It has actual style and an actual point of view and cool cinematography and an interesting soundtrack. It has comedy. It's funny. It has
compelling lead performance.
Very much so. It has Tom Cruise not only being compelling, it has him doing his maniacal laugh, maybe for the first time. I haven't seen Outsiders, which came out the same year. He also runs. This might be his first run, but he full on does the Tom Cruise run.
Right, he does.
He wears hilarious jorts in this movie. Oh, actually, I have to take that back a little bit, because Sean Connery in the final action scene is also wearing weird shorts. And
he is. I remember
1,000 years old. It also has a simply absurd amount of statutory rape, which I can't defend.
It was 1983. I mean,
it was 1983, and all these boys needed to get laid by full-on prostitutes. Risky Business is a great movie, and I am so upset you didn't give it to me. Actually, I'm not that upset anymore because I watched it anyway. Yeah. I watched it this morning before I went to work, and I was like, this movie rocks.
That kind of blows my mind, actually. Maybe I didn't take the time to look at it, and maybe I rushed myself, because I definitely should have picked that for you. I love that movie, and I recommend it actually quite a lot. I feel like a lot of people haven't seen it.
Yeah, my guess is what happened is you don't have a rating on Letterboxd for it. By the way, I gave this 4 stars. It's just a great movie and so influential. This came out 2 or 3 years before Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Yeah.
Ferris Bueller's Day Off has major Risky Business vibes.
Yeah, and Risky Business is 100 times better.
Oh, that's an interesting claim. I don't know if I agree with
my hot take.
Times.
My hot take of the day is I don't like Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Okay, fair enough. I do like Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I also really like Risky Business.
3 years first.
3 years first. It also came out. Now, it's interesting that it came out the same year as Trading Places. These are 2 great comedies to come out in the same year. Trading Places is a much more narratively tight movie. You always know what people are feeling, and it follows a decent formula. Risky Business doesn't follow a formula. They don't get to the risky business until the 3rd act. An hour goes by before the business starts. Also, Tom Cruise randomly starts narrating the film in the 3rd act. He is not doing that up to that point. My theory on why you didn't give this to me is I think when you sorted on Letterboxd the films that you'd seen, you probably sorted it by rating, and you have not rated Risky Business, so it may have come lower as a movie you'd only logged as watched and not reviewed.
That is a good theory. That makes sense.
But I was mad. So anyway, we have to talk about frickin' Never Say Never Again.
Yeah. And it's such a weird Bond movie too, because it's not even canon. It's not owned by Eon. Eon Productions, the one who make all the Bond movies. They didn't make it. They don't claim it. Like when those James Bond DVD, Blu-ray, whatever sets come out, Never Say Never Again's not included in that. It's not part of the Bond universe. Like as far as they're concerned, it doesn't. The Broccoli family, Barbara Cubby Broccoli was like the producer of the old movies. Barbara, it's his daughter now. It's not part of it. So it's just this weird little outlier of a movie that nobody asked for, nobody wanted, nobody likes. Sean Connery, I'm pretty sure, didn't want to do it and was bored while he was making it and talked trash about it afterwards.
Sure looks like he didn't want to do it. He looks so bored.
Yeah, so just not caring. I mean, there was just nothing going on in that movie. I don't know, maybe I should have given you Octopussy, though. That's at least got some crazy, like Roger Moore literally dressing up as a clown.
I would love that, because my favorite Roger Moore performance is Man with the Golden Gun, and that movie is just so weird.
Yeah.
And that movie is not good, but it's 4 stars for me because I'm laughing throughout the whole movie. I would love to have watched a campy Roger Moore movie. Now, granted, at this point, Roger Moore is super old. The whole gimmick. So first off, do you know who produced Never Say Never Again?
No.
This is going to make you hate it even more, because I know you don't like Jason Schwartzman. Jason Schwartzman's dad produced Never Say Never Again.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Irvin Kershner directed it. The guy who directed Return of the Jedi. Or no, Empire. I'm sorry. He directed Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah. Who would have guessed? This movie's trash. So it's called Never Say Never Again because it's a meta joke. Sean Connery Connery said he'd never be Bond again, and here he is being Bond again. This is the biggest age gap between any James Bond and any Bond girl. I did the research. Roger Moore in Octopussy this year was actually older than Sean Connery was in Never Say Never Again. But Tanya Roberts, who's the Bond girl in Octopussy, is older than Kim Basinger. Tanya Roberts, rest in peace. Sean Connery, rest in peace. Roger Moore, rest in peace. Kim Basinger, still at it.
Good.
Man, there's a career that it's such a bummer that she fell off. Hollywood stinks.
She won that Oscar, and then people were like, okay, done with you.
Yeah, she got to do 8 Mile, and that was it.
And she was dating Michael Shannon in 8 Mile, which has got to be a career highlight, getting to act with Michael Shannon.
But Michael Shannon was such a bad dude in that movie.
He was, yeah, but it's still Michael Shannon.
He's such a good boy. I was about to ask you if you've seen it. Oh, I said
I'm such a lucky boy.
He's such a lucky boy. God, that's such a funny clip.
That's my favorite thing. Yeah, he's so great.
If you haven't seen this, go on YouTube and search for Michael Shannon in the Criterion Closet. He's just such a weirdo, and I love him so much. I hope it's still up because Bon Appetit magazine and the Bon Appetit YouTube channel has been the subject of a lot of controversy in the last few years, but hopefully they kept up their archive because he did an episode where it's called Cooking with Carla and Michael Shannon, and watching him cook and try to deal with that is so funny. Just watching him, who's such a weirdo, doing regular like film promotion, it's the weirdest thing in the world.
I saw somebody ask him about getting back into Superman or whatever, being Ziegler, and he was so confused, like, I think didn't I die in the first movie or something? I don't know. You're like, he was so confused, he couldn't remember. Right?
Did you see Flash?
No, I actually did not get to see it. No,
I got to tell you something. He definitely hasn't seen it. He's so phoning it in that movie.
I was gonna say, wait till we cover. I believe I put Take Shelter on the list. Yes, I did. We'll talk a lot about Michael Shannon in that episode.
Is that Jeff Nichols?
Yes, it is.
So when we do that, I'm just going to watch every Jeff Nichols movie because he's got a new one.
One of them is good.
He's got one called The Bicycle Riders coming out, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and Michael Shannon, of course, will be in it, I believe.
Of course.
But he's in all. What was I talking about? Oh, here, let me bring up more of my notes for Never Say Never Again, this weird movie. Daniel Craig was the same age in No Time to Die as Connery was in this, and Connery was younger than Roger Moore.
Wow.
And Roger Moore was younger. Roger Moore was older than Sean Connery in For Your Eyes Only, Octopussy, and A View to a Kill. I also hate this. We haven't even talked about what the plot is of this movie because it's incomprehensible. So Spectre, despite the fact that this was the only movie that this production company could make, the only Bond movie they could make, this could not be a franchise. It was not possible. This was the only movie they had the rights to. They tried to build in a little universe. They had Max von Sydow, of all people, playing Blofeld, and he's barely in the movie.
Right.
He's not the primary villain. The primary villain is this other European, like, faceless dude who reminded me of the bad guy in Quantum of Solace, which is to say, who cares?
Right.
So they clearly wanted to do more. But how is that ever going to happen? So it's just a weird tease. This villain, this faceless guy, has stolen 2 nukes for Spectre and is going to do something with them, and they're hidden underwater. And that's how it's similar to Thunderball. I've never seen Thunderball, but this is a weird story. My stepdad, he's not my stepdad anymore. I had a stepdad when I was like 13, and he always told me that he hated underwater movies because being underwater meant the action had to move more slowly. So he said Thunderball was the worst Bond movie. So I never saw it. I internalized that. And he was a big movie guy. He took me to see The Big Lebowski.
Oh, good for him. Thunderball's not the worst Bond movie, but
this is.
I see where he's coming from.
This Never Say Never Again is the worst Bond movie.
By far, yeah.
Yeah, he steals nukes and Bond has to get the nukes back. In the middle of the movie, Bond and this guy, they both know that the other person is their enemy. And yet, the villain keeps letting Bond do whatever he wants. How is this compelling?
It's not. That is the answer.
Everyone's terrible in this. Sean Connery has weird thin hair. He looks like a marionette. He's wearing so much makeup. He looks like he's AI.
Yeah, it's real bad.
We could have just said screw it and watch The Dead Zone because we were supposed to do like a watch along together of The Dead Zone a while ago and we just haven't done it. So we should just do that anyway.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That's it. That's all I have to say about this trash movie. I'm mad at
trash.
You. Do you have anything to say about it? Do you remember anything about it?
I remember very little about it other than like Sean Connery looks old. He looks bored. That video game sequence was ridiculous. It just looked so bad. I mean, everything about it just looked cheap. Gosh, I really feel bad I recommended this to you. Like, at least like Octopussy at least has the benefit of being part of the James Bond canon. You can at least say it like checks something off the list, of James Bond films. But this one doesn't even do that. It's just this standalone garbage. I don't think I've felt bad about any of the movies I've picked for you yet, but I'm gonna feel bad about this one.
Yeah, I think I gave this. There's a chance this is in my bottom 50 movies of all time.
It's pretty bad.
1 star. This is in my bottom 50 movies of all time.
Fair.
Yeah, and I'm not really that much of a Bond guy. Like, I'll watch the new ones when they come out, but I'm not dying to see the old. I'm checking the old ones off my list very slowly. Really, it's only the Roger Moore ones that I'm missing, but I'm checking them off very, very slowly.
Right.
Anyway, that was 1983. I'm tired now. We'll be back next week with 1960. What? 1963. We're going back 20 years to 1963. See you next week. If you want to know what is coming out next week, go to our Letterboxd profile. You can find me at Brad Garoon on Letterboxd. I think, Jake, you're Jake Ziegler on Letterboxd.
Yep, it's Jake_Ziegler.
And both of us have pinned to our profiles our Never Did It podcast list. You could also just search for the Never Did It podcast list. And the 2 movies that will be discussed on next week's episode are always at the top of that list. So check that out. And thank you for joining us for Never Did It.